The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
Who would have thunk it? Week 18 and the Lions and Vikings going for 15 wins.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Biggest regular season game, some Luke are saying, in the history of the league. Do you buy
in the history of this matchup?
Do you buy that?
That's a bit much, but I'm sure there have been other ones. But I was thinking back. I mean, I feel like I've said this every time we've talked this year, Matt. But the fact that this matchup is so colossal, when I mean, just like 3 years ago, this would have been on the 9th slot on Fox at 1 p.m. Eastern. Like,
would have been
we would have. Yeah, they would have been pulling up college announcers. I mean, this is nothing. This used to be nothing, this sleepy thing. But now it's this marquee matchup, and it's Vikings-Lions. It wasn't supposed to be this, and I love that. These two dome teams in the NFC North. But yeah, like this is by far the most, and maybe even the only time that there's been like a possibly season-defining Vikings-Lions game. Like if whichever of these teams loses, if they go one and done in the playoffs because they got to go on the road and play like Baker Mayfield, and that's tough, this will be the game that is seen as the one that defines the season. As, man, they were looking right at it, but they just couldn't get past their rivals. And I can't remember a time when either team's season came down to a Vikings-Lions game. It's always been, there's been plenty of times where it came down to a Lions-Packers game or a Vikings-Bears game or Vikings-Packers, but I can't think of a time when this was more than just another one in the regular season. I think that's beautiful.
The game, what game was it? Well, it wasn't at the end of the year, but the Golden Tate somersault into the end zone game had some meaning years ago.
That was week 4, 2017, I think.
Yeah. Well,
it was, the Vikings were 13-3, and that was one of the three.
Yes, but nothing like this. I agree with you.
No.
And the Lions and Vikings have played some, like you're right, some stinker week 18s, week 17s have not mattered, and it's awesome. It is so much fun. How do the Vikings get this done, Luke? How do you see it that they go in there and win? What do they have to do?
Yeah, I think it's your P's and Q's on offense, right? Like everybody sees what has happened to this Lions defense. There's a lot of tape on it, and I think you'd be crazy if you didn't think the Vikings were going to be able to move the ball here. But you look at the other side. And this Lions offense has had the keys to Flores. They have owned this defense in the past few games. But it's every time you get back in the ring, it's harder and harder and harder to repeat it, because the Vikings are going to have a different answer this time. They know that what they brought to the last few doesn't work. They're not going to just bring the same. So if the Vikings can get Jared Goff uncomfortable, which they have not been able to do. Goff's been getting the ball out totally untouched in all of these games. And interestingly, they didn't really blitz in that last game. And this is a stat I know you're not going to get anywhere else. That cover zero look that the Vikings have with everybody strung out on the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
The Lions were the one team that they barely ran it against. They ran it twice in that game. That's as little as any other game this whole year. They didn't use it. And maybe that's because they thought the Lions could beat it. Maybe they just thought they had a different idea. But maybe they bring that a little bit more this time. Maybe they still don't. And that is a sign of respect, by the way. The teams that they have brought it the most against are like the Titans and teams with rookie quarterbacks, like the Bears. But against the Lions, they didn't feel like that was the way to go. So did they go away from what they wanted last time? And that's why the Lions were able to score, on 4 straight long, sustained touchdown drives. Maybe. And then they got to kind of figure that out. But if the Vikings can get those disruptions, force those turnovers the Lions have been so good at avoiding, and prevent themselves from that like turnover avalanche that seems to happen in all of these Lions games, where, they get up by a score or two, and then suddenly there's a turnover, and then it's a 3-score game, and then you're just chasing it the whole time. You got to avoid that little sequence, that avalanche. And the Vikings have given that avalanche to other teams. So if one of those happens to one of these teams, that could be the key. Just who gets that nice streak, that one, that crazy quarter where you're going out of it going, and all of your beat reporters are tweeting about how much of a disaster that quarter was. Or will this be a little bit more back and forth and stay on the knife's edge for the whole time?
Yeah, I mean, I really, truly see this as a track meet. I think, number one, Dan Campbell, I think this is for Coach of the Year. I think the winner of this game wins Coach of the Year.
Maybe. Although those odds are off of FanDuel already, so I think it might already be a little decided, but perhaps.
So I think Dan Campbell's still got to be himself in this game. And if there's an opportunity for 3, but he knows right now our defense isn't getting it done and I got to go for it, just still be yourself. That, number one, is a key for me. Number 2, I said it earlier. There's 2 guys out there right now that could get flagged for being too, overhyped in this game. And that's Darius Smith,
discipline,
who's always out for blood against the Vikings, as he thought he got screwed over by them and Green Bay. And like I said, Robertson and Jefferson, I think is going to be just a knockdown, drag out street fight, those 2. So
are they going to man it up? Are they going to leave that matchup to happen, or is this going to be more of like a zone thing?
I think Aaron Glenn's who he is. I think he loves man, and I think he wants to put his guys. Look, Justin Jefferson in a zone where he gets the ball and goes could be scary too.
Yeah, like the Lions play without fear.
So good.
Like that's the Dan Campbell thing. They play without fear, and everybody else has played with fear against the Vikings. When you play with fear and you contract and you do a bunch of perimeter screens and you try to, live in your quick game and off defensively, you bracket Justin Jefferson because you're scared of him. Everything that the other teams do that plays into the Vikings' hand, they do out of fear. And the Lions say, all right, Justin, you can get your 150. But we're going to try to win the game anyways. That has been, I've gone on these crossovers all season, Matt, and I've said, well, here's how the Lions did it. So maybe you want to go take that. I think that's the reason the Lions have become so good is that lack of fear. And I do think that it sort of neutralizes some of the stuff that's worked so well for the Vikings all season.
And I'll say, no, I think you're spot on, Luke. And I think the biggest, another key just real fast is ball control. The Lions offensive line is so damn good. And if they can push Minnesota around a little bit, Gibbs, Craig Reynolds, Jamar Jefferson, the 3 backs that they used and utilized well Monday night, can keep Minnesota and the guys we talked about, Addison and Hawk and Jefferson and Darnold off the field, Aaron Jones, that'll be a plus. The Lions have to continue to run the football and do what they do. Do you have a prediction? Do you think your boys are going to do this?
I have no idea. The over-under is insane. This game is going to be insane. I know better than to try to predict it.
I know.
I will say, I'll give you one more key though, to this one. And that is how the Vikings align their safeties. Last game, they aligned their safeties in a lot of too high. They love to align too high. They do this all the time. And to some degree, this happens to them in every game where teams will run the ball a little bit because they got to get a safety to fill in the alley and they can find the gap. That's the safety's gap. That works a little bit. They basically accept that as a cost of doing business for the coverages that they do. But the Lions really took advantage of it in that first game. So if the Vikings can either do better out of 2 high run fits, which is a little bit like saying, well, why didn't you just win more games? Like way easier said than done. Or do they kind of bite that bullet, get Harrison Smith in the box a little more, get Josh Metellus in the box a little more and try to fit these things up a little bit stronger? Since the last time we played, there's been a sort of breakout of an unknown guy named Jalen Redmond. He's good for a couple of really awesome, like knifing TFLs a game. So maybe he becomes a different thing, but that might be a key to slowing down this run game. I think the only thing that feels obvious is that the Vikings offense will work, and the Lions offense has worked the last few games. So it feels like this is going to be a bit of a track meet. If it's not, then somebody, either Aaron Glenn or Brian Flores, figured something out.
Lions going for the season series sweep, of course, winning in week 7, as Luca talked about before, on a Jake Bates field goal at the horn. I'm going to keep my prediction also for later on in the week. I'm with you. I have no idea either, but I'll tell you this.
I don't need to try to guess I don't need to tell you in advance what's going to happen. You want to sit down and watch this game. Why would I spoil it?
Ford Field's going to be rocking. It's going to be crazy.
Oh yeah.
And I can't.
And the All Blacks.
That's what it sounds like. The Lions.
Yeah, they tweeted the Lions.
They were going to wear
official account
old throwbacks, but it sounds like they're going to go to the black, and we'll see what that does. If they lose this game in those black uniforms, I can guarantee you never see them again.
Oh my God, yeah, that's so cursed.
This is incredible. This could be the biggest game in NFL regular season history. Never before have 2 14-win teams got at it. First time since 93, heading into January of 94, where you had the number 1 seed up for grabs in the last week of the season. We're here to break it all down. Again, Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings, Matt Derry, Locked On Lions. as Detroit will host Minnesota on Sunday, 1 o'clock, or I should say 8:20 Eastern, 7:20 Central. Luke, it's great to see you, brother. This is crazy, right? No one expected this, but this is how it should be. And I know Dan Campbell's excited for the Lions to go through this, but what are the thoughts of the Vikings right now as they have a chance to get the 1 seed and go on the road and shock the world?
It's funny. So they just posted, as of this recording, they just posted their weekly field access segment, which is kind of a sound FX segment that they do after wins. And right after the game against Green Bay, it's Harrison Phillips is talking to a teammate and he says, well, that was the game before the game. So they've been looking at this one, right? And they've, I think, been very keenly aware since the Bills beat the Lions, like since that day, that they went, if we can win out, we can take this to Ford Field with everything on the line. I think that has been like the idea. Now they've taken care of that business. They won the 3 games after that. And now they are seeing this as, I mean, this could be impactful to the NFC Championship. I mean, like at this point, no matter who wins this game, it feels like I'll be surprised if we don't talk again on one of these, Matt.
Let's get to the big heart of the matter here, though, Luke. You swept Peter Bukowski. That's all Lions fans care about. And locked
so say us both.
Yes, I mean you and I together went 4-0 against Pete.
4-0 against Pete.
That in itself is
got to get Lauren one in a meaningless week 18. Get some hope over there.
Oh my goodness!
Like it's so funny. Like the NFC North preview that we did. Like I go listen to that, everybody. I was unbelievably wrong in that. Like I was so down. I was like, we're surviving here. Like I'll be happy if we win 6 and look respectable. Right. And then now here we are. Not only are the Vikings and Lions going, like they're going at the team that was promised here, which is the Lions, with the 1 seed on the line. But if they win that, they probably vault to like top 1, top 2 in Super Bowl odds. I mean, this is not just a good story anymore. This is a team that is like, that must be taken seriously. And we can talk about what it is about that team that makes them so scary right now, why they're playing so hot. But it's just a thing to marvel at every once in a while, to just look back at the peak that you've climbed.
Give me the biggest storyline. I just love watching the Vikings play this year because it just seems like it's 21-0, 20-7. Minnesota just jumps out at you, like KOC on the offensive side, Flores on the defensive side. Is that just the biggest storyline, that if they do this at Ford Field again, then it could be trouble for Detroit?
I mean, yeah, a lot of people noticing that Justin Jefferson at Ford Field, he puts up like $150 every time. He averages an insane thing in specifically in the road game against the Lions. So yeah, if they can, and now of course the Lions defense is all banged up and stuff, so everybody thinks they're going to go get 50. The over under for this game is 57, which is just obscene at FanDuel. So yeah, I would say the big storyline is still right now Sam Darnold. Everybody's now kind of looking ahead a little bit, putting the cart before the horse a little bit, by asking, well, what do they do with Sam Darnold in the offseason? He's scheduled to become a free agent. It was just a 1-year deal. Do you tag him? Do you let him walk? Do you offer him some kind of Baker Mayfield-esque, mid-tier deal? Will he take that? All of those questions I think are better to be asking in, February and March when you're actually looking at it, and because there's games to be played here. But the dude's just playing good ball. They hunt explosives all day long. That's the nature of this offense. There's not a lot of, 6 yards, quick and easy. Let's do like rhythm and execution. No, it's, 7-step drop, play action, double moves on the outside, shot play, kill shot. And while they will probably have, a couple of times where they go 3 and out, first down, second, first and 10, second and 10, third and 10 punt, because they, have just tried the deep ball too many times, or they'll take a dumb sack doing that. Over the course of the game, they will find enough of them to make all that worth it. And that's kind of how that goes. They will get into a 2nd and 16 after a sack, but then they're going to go right back to it and find a 20-yard pass, and you're going to be all right with it. The pass catchers are Justin Jefferson speaks for himself. Addison, Hawkinson, they're all threats. And Darnold has been able to find the holes in the coverage, or to find the guy that found that leverage, to go through those peer progressions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 really fast, and the O-line's holding up as well. Everything's clicking.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Steelers Bengals rematch, and there's lots of playoff stakes on the line.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It's been like, a month or so since the last time we did this, and these teams have taken some different directions since then, but both have playoff stakes on the line. The Bengals need to win to have a hope to get into the playoffs. They would need some help after this game, but the Steelers, they are in the playoffs, but they need to win this game. One, if the Ravens somehow lose to the Browns, don't think that's happening. Then the Steelers could a Steelers win would win the division, but a Steelers win also guarantees them they would be no lower than the 5th seed, which would match them up with the Houston Texans, who I think we can all kind of agree are the weakest of the division leaders right now in the AFC.
Yeah, I think so. I think the Bengals and the Steelers would love to play the Texans in round one. Obviously, it's not possible for the Bengals, but the Steelers are playing for that. And by the way, I don't think anyone here in Cincinnati, some fans probably, but thought that Mike Tomlin would rest starters this week. Even if they know, no, why would you? I would much rather play Houston in Houston than have to go on the road and deal with Baltimore or go on the road really and play anyone else not named the Houston Texans. I think that they're clearly the worst playoff team in the AFC. I guess you could debate it if the Dolphins get in. I'm not going to debate it. I look at that and I'm like, man, Houston's playing at a really poor level. But you're right. I think Bengals wise, what a 180 it's been since December 1st when you were here in Cincinnati versus now with the Bengals going up to Pittsburgh.
It's such a 180. I mean, you look at these two teams since that game, the Bengals lost to the Steelers. They have won all 4 of their games since then, beating the Cowboys, Titans, Browns, and Broncos, handling their business to make it done. And it's kind of crazy. I don't know if you've been watching Hard Knocks. I've been watching all the episodes, and you go back to around the time when that Steelers game happened, I think the first episode, in fact, and you see Zach Taylor put up like, hey, our playoffs start now. We have to win these games to have a shot at the playoffs. And they lost that Steelers game, but they have won. They put themselves in the conversation for the playoffs, which, around that time after they lost that Steelers game, I marked the Bengals out. I was like, they're toast. There's no way they can get back in it. And listen, they could still win this game and not be in it, but they deserve credit for fighting back, not letting this season fall away and making this season come down to the last game.
Yeah, I think had you told me on December 1st at 5:00 Eastern time that, oh, hey, I know they just lost 44-38, but they're going to be in it till the end, I'd be like, get out of here. Get out of here. This game, this team, they can't beat anyone. They can't win close games. And they've done that. They went on the road and won 2 games after that. And then they came home and beat a division rival. And I get it. It's a bad Browns team. But then they beat a good Denver team. And I do think that that's a good team. And so it's like, all right, well, now you have a chance. And I think it's a mixture. It's, oh, man, I can't believe they have a chance despite how they played earlier in the year. And a lot of people have looked at it, including myself. And it's like, oh, well, if you hadn't lost by 6 to New England in week 1 or lost by 1 to the Ravens or lost in overtime to the Ravens at home when you had no business losing to that game or lose to the Steelers where you come out pretty lackluster early on in that game with your season on the line, especially on defense. And there's so many of those games, the Chargers game, there's so many of these 1-score games. And it's like, well, yeah, that's why you're 8-8. That's why they need help this week. Had they won any of those games, they wouldn't need help. They would just need to win and be in. Instead, they have to play their way in and get some help as well.
Yeah, they do need some help. The Steelers, here's the thing. I know that there's probably some people out there like, why aren't the Steelers resting their guys, using this as a bye week. And I think a big part of people don't understand, the Steelers haven't played good football for almost a month. Since that Bengals win, they're 1-3. Their one win being over the Browns. They did have a rough stretch, sure. 3 games in 11 days. And whereas other teams had to go through that, no other teams had a high win total count in those opponents, like at the Eagles, at the Ravens, and then at home against the Kansas City Chiefs. That's a tough stretch for anybody to haul, and they did not handle that well. I think of importance for the Steelers in this game, as much as winning to get to Houston is, if they can win this game, they guarantee themselves Houston as long as the Ravens don't win, and then they would win the division. I think just important for the Steelers is getting back to playing your style of football, which you might not have seen this. Well, I think they did. They played their style of football against the Browns. They handled them on December 8th. But getting the ball to George Pickens, being a turnover, first defense, protecting the football, those are things the Steelers can do and have done several times. In fact, for most of this season. But I think it's imperative for this team, especially with a lot of the new pieces, including Russell Wilson, including some of the rookies that are starting on the offensive line. It's imperative for them to put that work out in front of themselves and say, hey, we can get back to this before they play in the playoffs, whether it's the Texans, the Ravens, or whoever else.
Yeah, and honestly, it's a good point. I think this is going to be the most difficult. The Bengals have won 4 straight. If they make it 5 straight, certainly the most difficult of the 5 is this game against a team that clearly needs to figure out how to right the ship. They want to right the ship going into the playoffs, regardless of who they play. Obviously, you would much rather play the Texans. So if you win, you can put yourself in position to do that. And you want to go in with a little momentum. And that's why I think, and we talked about this a few minutes prior to recording, if you're the Bengals, you're going in with all the momentum if you can find your way in. But you have to overcome the biggest hurdle, which is going on the road, prime time. It's their 5th road primetime game this year. That's an NFL record. No team has had to do that. Go on the road 5 times in primetime. So you have to go on the road, division rival, AFC North road primetime games. Very rarely does the road team win. It's a weird thing in the AFC North that has happened. And so it's a tough environment, obviously. Stakes on the line for the Steelers. It's a really nice test, I think, to end the regular season or potentially end the season. And regardless of what happens around them, it's a big game for the Bengals. They can go into the offseason or into the playoffs with their 4th straight, winning record, which matters. I know Mike Tomlin talks about that all the time. Bengals winning, posting a winning record for 4 straight years. They've only done that once in team history. That's from 2011 to 2015 with Andy Dalton. To do it last year with losing Joe, and then to do it this year where they were 4-8, I do think that would matter. So yeah, we'll see if they can do that. Obviously, playoffs are on the line, but that mark is a big one as well.
Get ready to tackle the NFL with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. And the Sugar Bowl today presents an interesting line. The point spread has changed a lot over the last week, and right now, Georgia is the underdog. FanDuel has Notre Dame as 1.5-point favorites over Georgia. The Bulldogs will have their backup quarterback playing, which seems like it's the reason the spread has gone against them. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
The Denver Broncos are in a win-and-in situation in Week 18, but a couple of Carsons for the Kansas City Chiefs are going to try to steal their playoff hopes.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
The Denver Broncos defense needs to bounce back in a significant way, and the offense needs to limit mistakes and find a way to pull through in a pressure-packed situation. We're going to break down some key storylines from Denver's side of things on this Crossover Thursday edition. Locked On Broncos, Locked On Chiefs, and this Crossover Thursday is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. As always, want to say thank you to every single one of you that makes Locked On Broncos and Locked On Chiefs your first listen of the day every single day. We really appreciate every single one of you for rocking with us. You know, your boys, Cody and Sarah, will have you over there, Locked On Broncos, and Chris and Ryan got you covered, Locked On Chiefs, all year round. And hopefully, Chris, for both of us, and I don't know that necessarily you guys really care about the Broncos making the playoffs, but hopefully from our side of things, both of these teams will be in the NFL postseason here. I don't know that anybody really wants the Cincinnati Bengals backing their way in. That'd be kind of interesting from the rest of the NFL's perspective or from the entertainment perspective, but from Denver's side of things in this, you mentioned it before, the pressure is on. And I think that's the most important thing that we're looking at here from the Broncos' vantage point. Can this team bounce back after 2 straight losses? Now, throughout the course of the season, we've seen Denver do exactly that. They lose a game or two. They come back. Specifically, we can go back to the last game against Kansas City, where they were in Kansas City. You lose an absolute heartbreaker in the worst possible fashion. You and I haven't even got a chance to chat about that since that happened. That was devastating. But then the Broncos ripped off 4 straight wins right after that game. So this team does have some mental fortitude, but can they do it against a lot of guys that they've probably not got any film on this season?
It's funny because had Denver won that game, and obviously things go differently throughout the season, regardless, but had Denver won that game, this game matters to Kansas City, and they can't rest their starters. They're playing everybody because then they have to worry about the Buffalo Bills getting the number 1 seed, because at that point they'd be 14-2. So, that loss changed everything for Kansas City. And heartbreaking is one way to put it. I mean, obviously I figured they lost. Like I literally was watching that game. I was getting ready to come downstairs to record the crossover, not the crossover, the post game. And I'm like, okay, well, they lost because chip shot field goal. And obviously that happens. I mean, in Kansas City, it's had some weird things this year. They block a kick. They had 3 different kickers kick a game-winning field goal for them. I 100% agree with you. I don't want to see the Cincinnati Bengals in the playoffs. But, I know Cincy fans will say that I'm hating on them for that, but it is what it is. I think it would be good for the AFC West, though, for the Chargers, who are already in the playoffs, the Chiefs that are in the playoffs, and the Broncos to make the playoffs. I think that's great for the AFC West to have 3 teams in the playoffs.
Yeah, I can't remember. I'll have to go back and check the receipts on this. I know we did our AFC West preview at the beginning of the season. I think a couple of us in that AFC West preview kind of talked about the fact that, man, maybe 3 teams in this division could be really good this year. And it's turned out to be the case. I mean, 3 teams with 9+ victories, 3 teams with winning records. That's the AFC West ain't getting talked about too much as the best division in football. Thankfully, there's the NFC North takes the pressure off in a way there. But man, it's kind of funny to see how these teams have bounced back after. Remember, just a couple of years ago, it was, oh, well, Russell Wilson and Derek Carr are joining, or Russell Wilson's joining the AFC West. You got all these, head coach quarterback combos. Everything could be awesome, and it's just completely shifted as teams have rebuilt. The Chargers getting Jim Harbaugh, and now Denver having Sean Payton and Bo Nix, and the Raiders just kind of drifting into anonymity at this point, which is fine by us over here at our respective shows. But
us too.
Yeah, it's good. So we talked about the defense hopefully returning to form. They've been absolutely terrible the last 4 weeks, and it's been a lot of either busted coverage or, you go up against Cincinnati last week, Chris, and obviously that's one of the best passing attacks in the NFL. So not a whole lot you can do about that. They're going to get theirs. It's just kind of, can you outscore them? Can you outlast them? That's been the story of their season thus far. Offensively for the Denver Broncos, I think one of the biggest storylines to look for here against the Chiefs is, can you limit mistakes and can you find a way to extend drives? That's going to be crucial because the Broncos have been very much hit or miss on 3rd down, a lot more miss than hit. Obviously, that's kind of to be expected when, number 1, you don't run the ball well, and number 2, you've got a rookie quarterback out there.
Yeah, and I think, not to take away from what this game means or what this game is, but I think the other big thing for me is Denver needs this type of game just to be in it and to get the experience. And I know I kind of said that when it comes to the pressure, but it also is the experience level of a playoff level atmosphere, which is what this is going to be. And Denver has a lot of young players, or a lot of players that have been in Denver for years and never really experienced this. So this is going to be completely new to them. So regardless of how this turns out, whether or not they make the playoffs, which I think that they probably will, and whether or not they actually get a win in the playoffs. It's a win for Denver because you're getting that experience to move up to the next level, and players are going to start to understand what that's going to take.
And a lot of these guys have been in games with some stakes. I mean, we could go back to last year where they played in Houston and they had an opportunity to really make a case for the postseason. And you go 0 for 13 on third downs. You throw an interception in the end zone to lose the game. Then you had a situation even against the New England Patriots last year on Christmas Eve, you blow that game against Bailey Zappi, which has a lot of Broncos fans having nightmares right now about facing another backup quarterback this coming week. And I think that now you look at this team with 2 straight games against the Chargers. You had an 11-point lead in the second half. You blew it. You had an opportunity to go for 2 at the end of regulation against the Bengals. You didn't take it. You got to overtime, but then in overtime, you blew it. You had 2 possessions in overtime. Couldn't even get a first down. So you're right. This Broncos team being in these spots, like there's guys like Cortland Sutton and Garrett Bowles who have really not ever experienced throughout their NFL careers, been in the league since 2017, 2018. They've never experienced these things. Then you've got the young guys who are none the wiser, having never been in these situations at all. And then you've got some of the other veterans they've brought in, like Mike McGlinchey, Ben Powers, players who have been in these types of big games. It should make for a very interesting sort of melding pot as you go, into this final week with everything on the line in Kansas City kind of playing with house money.
Yeah, and I mean, let's not forget, not only did they get the ball twice, but they got a blessing because the Bengals kicker missed a field goal. I mean, you get a field goal blocked against Kansas City, and then later on you have a Bengals kicker hit the upright, which would have sealed them being in the playoffs a week before, and then it would have really changed how this game would have had to play probably. So, you look at this, and I think it's going to be intriguing from the Broncos' perspective, because you're right, they have to win, but they also have to do it in a way that is smart. They don't want to show everything. They have to win, and if they have to pull more stuff out, they have to pull more stuff out. But you want to hold stuff back for the playoffs if you can. So it's going to be a give and take on both sides. I mean, Kansas City, I think, is going to come out and play very vanilla, and they're going to try to see what they got in their young guys. And you made a great point earlier. Denver's going to be coming in and not knowing what some of these young guys can do. That's a problem too, because you don't know exactly who you're going to be facing, one, and how you're going to be facing this Chiefs offense and defense.
It's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out in Week 18. The Denver Broncos and the Kansas City Chiefs taking each other on